And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining me on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, I've got a guest that checks almost all of the boxes of the types of folks that we talk with. So Harry Kraemer, he's the former CEO of a little company called Baxter, you may have heard of. He's written 2, maybe 3 books now. His latest book is Your 168, Finding Purpose and Satisfaction in a Value-Based Life. And he can't get out of school. He is an academic at Kellogg, at the School of Management at Northwestern. So normally, we talk to people and say, oh, you come from business. Yes. You come from academia. Yes. Or you're a published author. Yes. So congratulations on confusing our hashtagging system internally and being woefully overqualified to be on this talk with me today. So welcome aboard, Harry.
Nice to be with you, Peter. Nice to be with you.
So how the heck did this happen? How do you go from, cushy great life as a CEO, you could have been kicking it back and golfing, to academia, and then maybe there's a side of masochism that says I'm going to write a couple of books as well. Like, give us the story, Harry?
Yeah, so a little bit of serendipity here, Peter. So I actually went to Northwestern. I always say it was a few years ago, and my wife says no, it was 40 years ago. And while I was there, the way I paid my way through, I graded all the finance papers for the finance faculty because, as I mentioned, I've been a math major. So that paid for it. So then when I was going to work, I got a job at Baxter International, and I said goodbye. And the dean said, you're not going anywhere. Baxter's in Chicago. I know where you are. So for 25 years, he'd call me every 2 weeks, and he'd say, I need you on a panel. I need you to be a guest speaker. And I made the mistake of saying if it wasn't for Kellogg, I wouldn't have been the CEO of a $12 billion company. He said, I'll never let you forget that. So I went there for 2 years, forgot to leave, and was there for 25 years. And the last 7 as the CEO. The day it was announced I was stepping down as the CEO, Dean Jacobs, at then 80 years old, the Dean Emeritus called and said, hey, I just heard it over the wire. You're leaving Baxter. Thank God. I want you to teach. And I said, you don't mean like have a syllabus, grade papers? That's not happening. I run
exactly.
companies.
Right.
And he said, I think you did say you do whatever I told you to do. So he thought I was going to do finance. And I said, you got all these brilliant PhDs. I have an MBA. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I'd like to focus on leadership, value, and ethics. He said, that's fine, but you better get a syllabus together because you start in 2 weeks. And so I've been doing this now for, I guess it's 13 years.
Now clearly, Harry, you could have said no.
You don't
apparently
know
not.
You don't know Dean Jacobs. Yeah. In fact, to show you how I can't say no, a couple of people said when I was leaving Baxter, oh, we'd love you to join our private equity firm.
Sure.
And he said, well, I said, I'm going to teach. I said, you can get out of that. I said, you don't know Dean Jacobs. No, I cannot get out of that. He was my professor. So no.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah, all good.
So give me a sense of sort of, in my work dealing with authors and CEOs and thought leaders and such, oftentimes there's this tension or lack of understanding between the academic community and the business community. And what I mean by that is, an academic will come out with an academically published paper, which is a polite way of saying a paper that nobody read, but they spent a lot of time writing.
You said that. I did. Yeah.
I said it. Yeah. I'm guilty. But you did shake your head yes, even though it's on audio. So
okay.
Throw you under the bus a little bit. So the academics have their way of communicating and doing things, and everything's got to line up to the 11th decimal, and they research and they study, and that's all fantastic. And then the business people go, yeah, that's great, but they wouldn't know a customer if they fell in their lap, or they wouldn't know whatever. And the reality is, it doesn't have to be binary. So given that you've lived on both sides of the world, what could academics learn from business leaders, and what can business leaders learn from academics? I think you're uniquely positioned to answer that.
Yeah, actually, Peter, it's a great question because I actually think both are necessary. So the way I look at it is, the way I think about it, very honestly, is academics bring, the framework, the process, the intellectual rigor to it. But at the same time, particularly in a business school, a lot of these students come and it's like, well, how do you be a CFO? How do you be a CEO?
Sure.
How do you manage people? How do you lead people? So in my mind, both are necessary. And I always really appreciated the academic side. But I thought to myself, hey, how do you bring both? So having one of these crazy characters who understands multiple perspectives, I thought, you know what, both are pretty important. So when somebody says which is important, I just say yes. To the point.
So that I want to push on that multiple perspective piece because I would think, I don't want to put words into your mouth, that could be, your key to success as a CEO, because so many people come at, if we look at business, so the CEO sitting at the top there, and the head of marketing saying X, and the head of finance is saying Y, and the head of IT saying yes, and they all mean well, and they all know well,
Yeah.
but that ability to see from multiple perspectives, where the marketing person might not even understand techno lingo, and the finance person might not really understand the creativity of a marketing person. How has that applied and worked for you on the business side of the house?
Boy, Peter, I don't know you that well, but it's a phenomenal question. That's the key to all of this, right? And what I try to train people. Let's just say you're my finance guy. The question I would ask you is, do you want to be a great finance guy working for a company, or do you want to be one of the people helping to run the company who, among other things, knows a lot about finance? So in my mind, you truly want to understand multiple perspectives from multiple sides. And very few people do that, because most people get very caught up in their way of thinking. Oh, that's how the engineer think. That's how the art. And if you can get your arms around it, I call it, can you get from the roots to the trees to the forest? You have an enormous advantage. And as you know, Peter, very few people pull that off.
So I want to use as an example, less or so finance, and more so there's a lot of conversation in the HR community around, oh, I want to have a seat at the strategic table. I want to have a seat at the table. I want to have the seat at the table. And from my view, is you get the seat at the table when you earn the seat at the table. No one's going to wake up one day and say, hey, Fred, here's a lovely seat at the strategic table, and it looks like it would fit you. And I think that there's this, and again, I'm beating up on HR, but it's very prevalent in that community, where they're really, really good at what they do and all the things that HR needs to do. But to your point, are they really shepherds of the business? Are they really a strategic partner? Do they get the vision, or are they sort of checking the boxes, protecting us, telling us the things we can and can't do? So could you unpack that a bit?
Well, I will. And in fact, once again, I love the analogy. So we're seated at the table. The HR person's there, the finance person's there, the sales guy's there. What happens? Well, usually the HR guy's sitting there, and he's kind of doodling, and all of a sudden somebody says, people, okay, that's me. Okay, now I jump in because I've just been watching the movie up till that point, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Or the finance guy's sitting there and somebody says, numbers, that's me. As opposed to Peter, the HR guy's sitting there, and when the manufacturing guy's saying something, literally they say, well, let me think about that. I've been studying this. Why do we have multiple plants in Europe? Why don't we just have one larger plant? Why don't we? Because you are a business. As I say, do you want to be an HR person working for the company, or do you want to be one of the people running the company who happens to know a lot about people? They are two very, very different people.
No, and I love that way that you unpack that. So I want to pivot for a moment to the third check the box for Harry. So we've got CEO, we've got academic, and then, as if that wasn't enough, you're going to go for published author. Are you a gold medal winner or a Nobel Prize winner as well? Or
I'm not. All I do is write and give a lot of speeches. Yeah.
So let's go back to your first book. Why did you choose to write a book, and then how has that publishing landscape changed over the years? Now that you're on your third book, I believe.
Yeah. So. First of all, if you ask me, when did I decide to write the first book? I did not decide to write the book. In fact, I decided I would not.
Is this the dean again? Did the dean tell you to write the book?
No. This is a fellow. This is a student by the name of Samir, who literally, in taking my class at Kellogg, said, "You need to write a book." And I explained, I don't even write short emails. I'm not writing a book. And he kept pushing me, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I used to have 55,000 people at Baxter that I, in a nice way, said, this is what we're doing. Now I have this 26-year-old who's telling me what to do. And I said, I'm not writing a book. So after the fourth or fifth time, he literally came into my office and said, can I take your class again? And I said, Samir, are you slow? I mean, you took the class. I don't have a part B. And he said, no. He said, I'm going to audio tape the entire course. And if you don't really decide to write a book, I'm just going to self-publish and print it all. Now, having 5 kids, Peter, I'm used to people having a lot of excitement for a couple of weeks. No, he shows up all classes, records everything, and shows up in my office with 250 double-spaced pages of an oral transcription of my first class, which, you don't realize how bad of a speaker you are until you read a deposition. And so I thought, well, how hard?
But the written word is very different than the spoken word. So I mean, it's.
Well, where were you? Where were you?
Yeah.
Right. Where were you, Peter? 10 years ago when this happened. So I thought this will be great. I got 250 pages. I'll sit down at the kitchen table. 6 weeks later, I had one chapter, 12 pages. I'm averaging 2 pages a week. And I said, you know what? I'll put it in my top drawer, and I'll deal with this when I'm 80 years old. I'm in a nursing home. And then Samir called and said, where are you? Where's the book? And I said, Samir, he goes, look, he said, I got you an agent. We're getting tired of waiting around. Okay. And then meanwhile, we contact Wiley and said, we'd like to sign a contract. And 10 months later, we have the first book.
I love it. So if you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. Tell me a couple things you learned about that, because we talk about obviously the spoken word versus the written word. Oftentimes, transcription is a good way to sort of capture the essence, but it is not a, run it through a piece of software and voila, out comes a book, because you read it and go, oh my God, that was a 7-page run-on sentence.
Yeah. Well, I did get lucky to a certain degree, Peter, because it took a lot of thought, to get it into written form. But there's still some semblance of the fact that's how it started off. Because now when I meet former students at the airport, they'll say, "Hey, I got a hold of your first book, From Values to Action." I said, "What'd you think?" He said, "In a strange way, it feels a little bit like you talking." Well, yeah.
Really funny you should say that. Yeah, right. So you must have enjoyed it enough, or again, the theme here, maybe can't say no enough, to then do it again and again. So why did you write the next 2 books, and what did you do maybe differently, or how did you approach this?
Well, it's funny, Peter, and this is one of the sides that I love about academia. Most of the ideas I get are from the students, really through a lot of the questions. So the first book, as you may know, was literally all about, no kidding around, how do you become a value-based leader? How do you do that? And that was the first book. Well, then after a couple of years, and after having given 300 or 400 talks, people started to say, I get it. That's how you're a value-based leader. But how do you lead a value-based organization? How does that happen? And I thought, okay, that's going to be my next course. And I focused on that. And then I said, here's how you're a value-based leader. Here's how you build a value-based organization. I'm done. And the conclusion of all this, last chapter, no pun intended, was about 11 months ago, because I've done so many of these talks, and all the proceeds, as I told you, go to this organization in Africa. They called and said, well, what are people asking now? And I said, interestingly enough, the major thing executives seem to be asking is, that's great, but how do you live a value-based life? How do you live a value-based life?
Yes, I love that, because that's a more, there's a lot of reasons underneath that, the millennials, the Gen Y, this more integrated, holistic approach where, you don't want to be a value-based leader if you're a jerk at home or a jerk in the community. Bingo. And it's no longer, the borders are pretty permeable now between work and home. Now there's no borders between work and home. It's, it's 17 steps from the office to the kitchen, which is a bad thing. Exactly. But so interesting. So it's sort of almost a trilogy, if you will, right?
You know what? It's funny, Peter. That's exactly what happened, because I thought, okay, well, how do you live a value-based life? And I said, sounds like a great idea. Give me a couple of years, I'll work on it. I said, no. We need the book by June. I said, I don't think that's possible. I said, oh, it will be, because here's the deal. If you finish and get the manuscript to us by June 1st, we'll make another very, very large contribution to the 1 Acre Fund in Africa. So, that's fine. And so it's funny, but I literally think of it. You're the first person who said it, Peter. It literally is like a trilogy. Here's how you lead yourself. Here's how you lead people. Now, how do you live a value-based life? How do you take what's important to you, your career, your family, your spirituality, maybe your health, having a little fun, realizing you're here for a blink of an eye? Do you have a moral responsibility to make the world a better place? And so it's
and those things need to be aligned. It's interesting, because I take my clients through an activity that we do when we're working on strategy, where they're fairly clear at this point, not crystal clear, but fairly clear around what the essence of their content is and all that. And I said, okay, great. So you're in the agility world, or resilience, or creativity, innovate, whatever it is. Let's get real now and say, okay, as a result of some intervention with you, some exposure to you, it could be in the form of a book or a program or whatever it is, what is the outcome at an individual level, at a team level, and an organizational level? The individual level is usually fairly easy. So people will, if this is negotiation skills, something, people will be better negotiators or communicators, whatever it is. It's when you get to the team and the org level, you got to answer those questions. And then you have to say, aha, what's the benefit to the organization of having being this type of organization? What's the ROI? What's the impact? How do they differentiate in the marketplace? How does it beneficial to their customers? It's client retention, talent attraction. So it's interesting that you sort of answered that riddle inevitably sort of somewhat backwards, right? You started sort of big. And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No.
And I haven't read all three, but are those books aligned?
Oh, I'd say they're incredibly well aligned.
Okay.
And it's basically become the classes that I teach at Northwestern Kellogg now. Absolutely. Totally aligned.
And would you, given that, I mean, now you're in a different position, you have all three books. Yeah. If somebody was starting down this journey, would you recommend they start with the latest book or the oldest book? Do they start at the individual level? Like where would you suggest they start the journey?
Yeah, no, again, perfect. I would definitely start with the third book.
Interesting.
And literally the whole idea of, guess what? If you're going to live a value-based life, first of all, what are your values? What's your purpose? What matters? You know, no kidding around. What kind of a person do you want to be? And how do you decide to make decisions? And how do you take the 168, the number of hours in a week? Yep. And how do you truly think about that? And is that aligned with your values and your beliefs or not? And sort of the basic idea, Peter, is how can you possibly lead others if you can't figure out how to lead yourself? So that whole idea.
And I love that because most of the energy and effort, particularly at a school like Kellogg, is really spent on the skill side, right? Cash flow and projections and case studies and strategy and all those things are critical, but they're also somewhat of a commodity and could be, you could argue, irrelevant if you don't have the other piece nailed, which is, and they're not teaching it in every business school, what you're teaching.
Yeah, no, it's become the hallmark of, I think, what we do at Kellogg now. You're absolutely right. And I always tell the students, all the mechanical things, you need to figure them out. You need to do them. But I would almost argue if you truly want to make a difference in the world, crazy analogy I use, if you go to Great America to the amusement park, you better know what cash flow is to get in the door. But whether you're in the door looking at the popcorn stand or you're running Great America, I think has a lot to do with, do you have, as you would know, not only IQ, but what's your EQ? What is your ability to relate and influence people? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
So if I were to say to you, Harry, hey, here's a magic pill, let's hang up and talk in a year, and all your dreams come true, or your goals are met as it relates to the new book and the thinking, and maybe not just the new book, but also sort of all of your thinking as you're putting it out at Kellogg, what would that be? So it's a year later, we're older, we're hopefully not still under quarantine.
I think it's a year later, Chief, and I probably will hopefully do another 300-400 talks that every person that I can have some influence on, and maybe increase the number of people that have a value-based approach to their life. That in my mind is a win. I feel like I'm here for a blink of an eye, and I told the dean at 65 now, my goal health-wise, if I can teach at Kellogg the next 20 years till I'm 85 and make a small impact on values, particularly the world we're living in now, where I won't get into it, but look, if I thought this was important 15 years ago, I would say it's astronomically more important given the crazy world we're living in today.
So in my vernacular, I would put that in the sort of evangelical bucket. That part of the reason you're on the planet is to get this message out there. Yeah. And it's not about the money, and it's not about the ego, and it's not about, you're sort of of service to the message. Yeah.
Right. Has nothing to do with anything. 100% of all the speaker fees, all the time, everything, the books, everything goes to the 1 Acre Fund. I need nothing. To me, it's a question.
Fantastic.
In fact, you could have your listeners just look up, Peter, oneacrefund.org. This is a fellow who has an amazing story.
Amazing. Well, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you sharing with us and coming on board today and telling us your story. And I wish you all the best. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Peter. Great to be with you. Great to be with you.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.